The TTS1 from VIVI has a 350 watt motor in the rear wheel, powered by a 36 volt lithium battery that can be removed once the frame is folded and the key turned to release it. The battery can then be charged either in the frame or on the go, which takes about 4 to 6 hours to do so. Now they say that power can take a rider up to 20 miles per hour. My radar gun is broke, so I couldn't get a solid read on the bike, but I was riding with some family the other day and matched my speed with their scooters, which was right around 20 miles per hour. Now that speed was on the highest of the 3 speed modes it comes with. The motor takes about 2 to 3 revolutions before it kicks on, and then takes about a half a second before it kicks off. Now that's with a full battery. As the battery drains, the power is delayed even more. When the bike was on the second battery bar, it sometimes took 5 revolutions before the power came on, so there's definitely a lag you'll notice as it continues to drain. However, there's very little delay with a twist throttle. It's almost instant starting and stopping. The throttle and pedal assist can be used at the same time. You'll need to hit the minus button until the pedal assist light turns off before the throttle will work. The acceleration was honestly better than I expected. It takes about 10 to 15 feet to really get going, but after that the power ramps up and does a very nice job reaching the top speed in less than half a block. Pretty impressive for a bike that weighs 50 pounds. Now I was surprised how low the weight rating is at 260 pounds. That's something you would see on a scooter rather than a bike. There is a 7-speed Shimano shifter, and when on the lowest gear was very easy to pedal without power. Just make sure there's not a lot of hills. The slightest slope will give you a good workout. VIVI has a range rating of 50 to 70 miles on pedal assist and 20 to 30 on pure electric. I ran a test on the highest pedal assist mode and got just under 19 miles. Now I got home with the battery bar switching between 1 and 2 bars. While riding it was 1, and once I stopped it bounced back up to 2, so I think I could have gotten another 3 to 5 miles. The delay in power was the main thing I noticed that changed throughout the ride. The speed and pickup stayed about the same, however on small hills the bike did bog down more than on a full battery. One thing that makes the TTS1 so unique is its ability to adjust and collapse. For example, the handlebars can adjust, the stem adjusts, which I really liked because at the highest level it's like sitting in a chair. I hardly had to bend over for my 5'11" frame. It makes the bike very comfortable to ride. Now at the bottom there's a latch to collapse it as well. The aluminum alloy 6061 frame also folds in half along with the 2 pedals. Totally collapsed down, it can fit in the back seat of most cars. Now for being so cheap, it feels solid. There were a few things that rattled loose on the first couple of rides, like the headlight, the fender, and rear reflector, but as far as the frame and build, it was smooth and sturdy, and feels like a higher quality bike. I was surprised to see front and rear suspension, especially for a bike under $700. Now it's not the best suspension, something you would expect on cheaper bikes. My only complaint with comfort was the seat. It's pretty hard. After about 15 miles, I started standing every few minutes to take a rest. VIVI has a hill rating of 15%. While on my range test, I headed up this canyon close by my house, which is uphill for 7 miles, with slopes ranging from 3% up to 12%. The bike slowed down to what felt like 9 to 10 miles per hour on the steepest part of the trail, so pretty decent for hills. The dual disc brakes are nothing to brag about, but nice to have on a bike this cheap. The TTS1 has a front headlight, a horn, it can be ridden in light rain, and comes with a 1-year warranty.
Hi everyone, I'm going to show you how to unbox and assemble an ECOTRIC Dolphin step through. It does help to have some tools of your own at home. For the unboxing, we're going to use some regular cutting pliers here. So first you want to cut the plastic strips. Now note that on some of these boxes there's a lot of glue on them, so it's possible that you have to use a knife and cut along the seam here. Just be careful to not stab the tire inside the box. It'll be hard to know where the tire is while you're cutting, but we're always going to try to lift the flap up without having to cut it in hopes that there wasn't too much glue on it from shipping. So this one's not too bad. A little bit of sticking. Alright, so once we have it open, we're going to go ahead and take out all the loose items to make it easier to pull the bike out. Including the foil. And set them aside for now. So that's good enough, we're pretty free. This is the hardest part, is getting the whole thing out. So it may take 2 people, but just grab somewhere on the frame. Don't grab the fenders. grab the frame, and we're going to pull it out here. See, everything is still tied together. And then this is where it may help to have someone else hold it while you start untying everything. As we start clipping all the zip ties, it may fall off balance, but right now we're looking good. It's going to stand up on its own. Double check that you got everything out of the box. So we've got the seat, and then it's a good thing we checked on this. The rubber cap that goes on the hub oftentimes falls off during shipping. We're going to take everything out of the accessory box here. So you do have most of the tools necessary to assemble the bike. We've got our manual and then Class 2 sticker. Make sure you put this on the frame somewhere, so if you're in a Class 1 or Class 2 only trail, you can prove that the bike is legal to be on that trail. We have our pedals. We'll show you that in a little bit later. Front reflector. A little bell for the handlebars. A rear reflector. A wrench. And then the battery charger. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is take the battery out. It makes the bike a little bit lighter and easier to work with. This battery comes up vertically, so we want to make sure that this clamp is out of the way. We see it's blocking, so go ahead and open that up. And then use your cutters and cut the keys off. And so over on the other side, we're going to stick the key in the keyhole. You're going to push the key in and turn it to the left, and that's actually going to unlock. You see the actuator right here. Unlock it, and the battery pulls right out. Alright, so we're going to unpack the styrofoam and packing materials in the rear part. So we've got tape around all these. It does help sometimes if you can get it started with these cutters, you see that, and then it comes right off. Be careful not to scratch the paint. If this hits the paint, it would scratch it pretty easily. Okay, now we're going to take apart the front assembly. Like I said, it helps if someone's holding, or you can stand right here, because as you start cutting, the pieces are going to start coming out pretty quick here. So just cut every zip tie that you see. Tire free. Go ahead and pull this cap off. That's to protect the disc during shipping. And then these little zip ties, use your pliers and just cut them to get the axle off. Careful not to hit the disc. This does bend very easily. This is for the brakes. So when you set it down, just don't lean the disc on anything. These are instructions on how to mount the handlebars, which we'll be showing you in a little bit. This offers good diagrams on which direction everything goes. So from here, you finish cutting and just start spreading everything out. You're going to have a few different pieces, and once you get it all spread out, you can start unpackaging everything. Okay, now that we're all unpackaged, we're ready to assemble. What I do is want to make sure to lay everything out so the cables are straight. So we're going to have the electronic display on the left side, and I've twisted the bars to where you can lay it nicely here and everything is straight. We're going to set the forks next to here. We have no tangles. So the first thing we want to do, and this is the tool it comes with, but I am going to use my own tool. Makes it a little bit easier. You're going to go ahead and use your 5mm Allen and remove the cap here. Okay, now that we've unscrewed this, we're going to take off these pieces and save for a few minutes here. Just pull this guy off. So you've got the top cap, and you've got a little gasket piece here as well. So this is a little difficult here. We're going to want to lift the bike up, and we're going to position the fork inside the tube here while keeping the cables aligned. So I'm going to lift it up. Keep this cable on the left side and the other one on the right. Go right in here. And now at this point with the fork in, it actually stands on its own pretty well. So it's pretty off balance until we get the fork in, and then it's pretty sturdy at that point. Okay, so we're going to take the small gasket piece here, and we're going to put it with the small side down. This is going to hold it balanced inside the tube. So just push it in until it's nice and even, and then we'll take the metal cap and slide that on. Just kind of work it. There we go. Okay, now we can go ahead and put the stem piece on here. Okay, so once you've put this on, we're going to want it so this handle here is in the front, and you can see the direction the handlebars are going to go, so it actually does sit at a little bit of a diagonal angle. And we're going to go ahead and screw in the screw here. Just line it up into the center. Once you open this, there's a hole here. Line it up in here. And we're not going to want to tighten it all the way. We'll wait until we do our final alignment of the handlebars. But just screw it in until it gets, just before it gets snug, so we can still adjust it if we need to. Okay, with this not all the way tightened, we'll go ahead and come up. Probably a good idea to lock this, that way they don't fall on us while we're doing the next task. We're going to go ahead and put the handlebars on the top here. We do have to take this piece apart to get them on, so go ahead and open the latch here. We're going to unscrew this. Be mindful of the metal piece that's in the middle of this, so just hold it so it doesn't fall out. Alright, so we've got the screw out. Make sure to keep the washer on there. We've got the little lever here with this metal piece in here. Take this little copper piece off. And then we are going to have to remove this flap to get the bars on. So go ahead and slide it out. Grab your bars, keep them nice and straight. Remember, panel on the left, shifter on the right. And set the bars right in here. This can be a little bit tricky. We have to line it up just right in the slot so it slides through nicely. So now we're in. We're going to take our little gold piece here. Line that up. Take the screw, make sure the washer's still on there, and work it up. And then you see that you have the threaded holes in here. Just make sure you line those holes up with the bolt. And start screwing it in. Alright, so we're going to screw it in here. So from here, we can adjust the pitch of the handlebars. Now this can be adjusted anytime you're using the bike because we have a quick release, so you don't need to stress on getting it just right away. But we do want to make sure that the left and right is even. So if you look, the handlebars have these notches in here, these grooves. So you just want to make sure that they're completely hidden. You see, so now they're on this side. So we're going to make sure they're completely hidden in here. And then I usually angle the handlebars to where the brake levers are just a little bit down. Again, that's something that we can adjust while you're using the bike. So now we want to tighten this. You want it to be just kind of snug. It doesn't need to be too tight. You definitely don't want it too loose. So right now it's probably too tight. It's a little hard to pull. So holding this steady, I'm going to loosen the screw down here a little bit. Still a little tight. Loosen it more. And now that's much looser. So that's probably actually a little bit too loose. So you're just going to kind of go back and forth until you feel like you have a good little snug on it. Just like that. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and mount the front tire. This is our axle piece here. You've got a cap and 2 springs. Go ahead and take this cap off with the spring. Notice that the springs are larger on the outside and smaller on the inside. And be sure to keep it like that when we install it on the bike. set that on this side and the axle over here. We want to put it in from the right to the left. That way this doesn't block the brake caliper. So now we're going to go ahead and put the tire on. What we're going to do is put these hook part of the forks are going to fit right into the threads here. And then this is the important part. We have our brake caliper right here, and you have a little gap between the brake pads. We want to make sure that we don't hit the disc on the brake pads or the brake caliper to avoid damaging the caliper or bending the disc. So we're going to line it up perfectly to where the center of between the pads slides nice and even in the rotor. So I'm going to go ahead and lift it up here and roll it right here. So I usually hold it with two hands and hold the tire with my knees, so hold it nice and steady. And then I'm going to slowly go down. First I'm going to line up the disc with the brake pads. So right now the brake pads are around the disc without bending it or pushing on it. And then now that I'm in there, I'm going to go ahead and line up the axle with the forks, and we're in. Now it's important that we seat this evenly. So what I usually do is just kind of give it a little shake. Make sure that the forks are both on evenly on both sides, or it's going to be difficult to tune the brakes and be unsafe. So while holding this up, we're going to take the axle, slide it through the hole here. Now you are going to have to hold with your hand the lever, because while we screw the cap in, this is going to want to turn. So with one hand, hold this from spinning. Hold the bike up. Again, it does help if you have someone helping you. Take the spring. Remember the larger side is going to be on the outside, so we're going to do smaller side in first. Take our cap and we'll screw it in here. And remember, I'm holding the axle from spinning by holding the lever with my left hand. And this is the same as the clamp on the handlebars. We want it to be nice and snug, not too tight, not too loose. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and double check the alignment. Give it a nice good shake. Make sure we're even in here. And let's test the tightness. I usually clamp this down with it going this way to avoid hitting the bar. So you see right now it's not even doing anything. So I'm going to go ahead and hold this again and tighten the cap more. Clamp it. A little bit. We're close, but not yet. Hold it. Probably turn it maybe half a turn. Clamp down again. I'm going to do just a little bit more. You definitely want to make it so it's not impossible to take this off if you need to. Perfect. That's nice and snug. And now we've got the front tire on. Now that you have the front tire on, you can go ahead and put the kickstand down, and now we don't have to worry about the bike falling over. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and tighten the handlebar stem here so everything is tight. We can see that the handlebars are loose with the tire. So what we want to do is start working our way to tightening it little by little, while keeping these straight. First, we're going to want to go ahead and open this up. To open it, lift the little silver piece up and then pull the whole handle out, and the handlebars come down. So I'm going to tighten this just a little bit. I want to make it to where it will hold its position. It'll hold its position without you doing too much to it. And so what I mean by that is if you grab the fork and you grab the handles, and I'm turning this right now, there's resistance. So I want a little bit of resistance, because if it's too easy to turn, then it's going to be hard to align it. So now that I have the resistance I want, I usually stand over the bike, and this is where you're going to hold the handlebars. Now it does help to clamp this so that way it doesn't move. And I'm going to angle this, and you're just going to make sure that the tire is completely perpendicular to the handlebars. Sometimes it helps to have a second eye take a look. So I think I've got it where I am right now. So I'm going to go ahead and lower this. And try not to turn the wheel too much so that way this doesn't turn. I'm going to tighten this just a little bit more. check my alignment, and we're still straight. So with this, we want to tighten it to where it's snug, not too tight, not too loose. Just give it a nice snug turn, and we're good. So right now, we're done with this bolt right here. The handlebars are straight. I'm going to go ahead and clamp this. And now it's time to tighten the rest of the clamp stem here. So the bolts to tighten are right here next to each other. And I usually do them simultaneously, that way we can tighten it evenly. And these ones, these bolts, you'll want them to be pretty tight, not as tight as the middle one, but tight enough to where the handlebars aren't going to turn while you're riding the bike over bumps. Okay, now that we've got the front assembly completed, we're going to go ahead and put our pedals on. Take them out of the plastic wrap. You see on this model, the pedals are labeled pretty easily. So we're going to have the right side and the left side. So we'll put this over here for now. On the right side, and you're going to use the wrench that's included, by the way. On the right side, we're going to go ahead and turn it clockwise. Get it started. And then just turn it all the way. And it's a little bit easier to tighten it with the pedal over here. So I'm going to put it right there for tightening it. It's starting to get tight now. Alright, so I'm going to hold the bike and just kind of give it a good... That's right where I want it. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and do the left side. This is where some people get confused. So usually you turn it clockwise to tighten. On the left pedal to tighten, we actually turn it counterclockwise. So just think of it as you're going to turn the pedals moving forward on each side. So we're going to turn this counterclockwise. And we're going to do the same exact thing on this side here. Line it up. Give it a good little pull. Now our pedals are on. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and put the seat on. Now, because we need the space here to put the battery, we can't have the cap blocking and we can't have the lever blocking. So I usually put it at a diagonal here so this whole space is clear. Slide the post in. And just like the tire lever, we want to make sure that it's snug, not too tight, not too loose. This is probably too loose. A good way to tell is you can try turning it, and you see I can turn the seat a little bit, so that's a little bit loose. So to tighten it, hold this from turning and turn the cap clockwise. Just like that. Seat's on. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and tune the derailleur and the brakes. As you can see, I'm using a bike stand. It does help quite a bit having it on a bike stand, so that way we can turn the wheels and do all of our tuning. You can do it without a bike stand. You could have someone hold it up. You could try to hang it, but anything you can do, put something under it, anything you can do to elevate the tires is going to help. In my experience with these bikes, when they arrive, usually the brakes are a little bit tight, so you can see it stops pretty quick. So the first thing I do is I'm going to loosen the caliper and the cable here, so that way it'll be nice and easy to tune later. So I'm going to first go on the pad bolt, the stationary pad, turn it counterclockwise a couple times. These are the two bolts for the caliper. I'm just going to loosen them. You don't have to take them off. And we're going to show you what we're doing in the few steps from now with the brake. So now that's a little bit loose. And now we're going to loosen the cable here. Now, when you get your bike and you spin the wheel, if it doesn't stop quick, like right now it's turning nice and free, you don't have to do this. As you saw with this bike, the wheel had resistance because the brake was pushing on it. So we know that we want to do some fine tuning with it. All right, now that's loose. so now we don't have resistance on the wheel. We're going to go ahead and tune the derailleur so it shifts nice and smooth. So what I do is on the gear shifter here, we're going to start at the very highest gear, number 7. I already put it there. So what you're going to do is while you're pedaling it, you're going to go ahead and put it in 7. And we're going to go ahead and turn the wheel from the 7th gear and go from 7 to 6. You're going to push the gear shifter, not the plus sign, but up here, to 6. And you hear how it's trying to shift, but it won't shift. So what we're going to do is while we're pedaling it, this little nut here, we're going to turn counterclockwise. That's going to tighten the cable, which will help it shift. So I'm going to turn it, and now it's shifted. Go ahead and put it from 6 to 5. That shifted smooth. That's 4, 3, 2, 1. Looks good. I'm going to do it one more time to make sure it's tuned right. So I'm going to hit the plus all the way. So we're going to go to 6. So it took a few seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten this just a little bit. There we go. We got a little bit quicker now. That was really quick. Go through each gear. Perfect. So now your rear derailleur is tuned. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and tune the front brake. What we're looking at right now is looking from the front down the caliper, and we're going to see probably gaps between on both sides of the disc. The first thing we want to do is go ahead and align the caliper. So just like we did on the rear caliper, we're going to loosen the caliper bolts. And then just as a side note, on these bikes, the front brake is on the right side and the rear brake is on the left side. It's a little bit opposite of standard, so keep that in mind. I'll loosen this as well. Okay, so what we want to do is make sure that the left and right adjustment of the caliper is lined up square with the disc. So what we do now is, now that everything's loose, I'm going to hold the cable and I'm going to pull the actuator up, and I'm manually holding it up. And what we're doing when we do that is both pads are coming together and they're going to clamp onto the disc, and in that action it will hold this aligned with the disc. So hold it clamped. While you're holding it, go ahead and tighten the caliper bolts. Now I usually just get them a little bit snug and then I let go, and then after doing that I'll go ahead and do the rest of the tightening. Okay, now that we have the caliper tightened, we're going to go ahead and adjust the pads. The way these brakes work is you have one stationary pad, and then the pad that's tied to the lever with the cable is going to move. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust the stationary pad first. Now sometimes in shipping, these discs, they are warped, meaning while it's turning, it'll be moving a little bit. So if it seems really bad to where you can't get the brakes adjusted where you like them, sometimes it's best to take it to a bike shop and have them tune the brakes. I do have a tool to be able to unwarp the discs. So now that we have tightened the caliper on, I'm going to go ahead and with my finger, because we still have the cable loose, I'm going to move the caliper just to reset the pads and spin it. And if you listen, you can hear some rubbing. So the goal is to tune it as tight as possible without it rubbing, or with it rubbing just slightly. So since it's rubbing a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and loosen the stationary pad. So it's this Allen right here. I'm going to loosen it one click. These ones kind of click. It goes click, click, so it'll be the same adjustment every time. So one click out. You hear it click. I'm going to go ahead and move the caliper here just to reset the pads. And now we're going to try spinning the wheel again. and now you hear that it's barely rubbing. So I'm going to leave the stationary pad at this setting because it's just barely rubbing. It's not enough to slow the tire down. Plus, once you start using the bike, the cables are going to stretch, the brakes are going to wear down. So it's a little better to adjust it tighter in the beginning because it's going to break in. Okay, now that the stationary pad is adjusted, we're going to go ahead and adjust the pad that's tied to the cable here. So what I usually do is I spin the wheel, hold the cable, pinch it with my fingers, and then slide this up, and I move it just until it starts rubbing, and then I tighten this bolt right here. So I'm going to go ahead and spin it. And right there we can hear it rubbing a little bit. So I'm going to try to get it just to where it stops rubbing. Right there. I'm going to hold it, and while holding it, I'm going to go ahead and tighten this bolt. You don't have to tighten it too much while holding it, just a little bit snug. Now that we tightened down just a little bit snug, you can go ahead and tighten it all the way. Okay, now it's time to go ahead and adjust this. So what we do for the adjustment is we're going to turn this little dial right here counterclockwise, and by turning this counterclockwise, it actually very slowly, because it's just a trim, it very slowly will move this up. And we're going to turn it counterclockwise until we hear the pad rubbing on the disc, and at that point we know that that's where we want it adjusted. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull. Now that this is tight, instead of having to do this manually, we can now pull the brake lever up here. And remember, the front brake is on the right side, so I'm going to go ahead and reset the caliper. Alright, we'll go ahead and spin it. Okay, and so now I'm going to turn this counterclockwise. We have no rubbing right now. And now we hear it just a little bit. Now in my experience, these cables, they stretch just a little bit, so to make sure that they stretch the least amount of as possible once you start riding the bike, once it starts rubbing like we heard, I'm going to go ahead and squeeze the lever a few times pretty hard. I'm going to try to stretch the cable out just a little bit, and then come back down here, spin the wheel and see. So you see it's not rubbing as much as it was because we just stretched the cable out. So I'm going to tighten it just a little bit, and we've got a little bit of rubbing there. Now I'm good with this because I know once we start riding it, the cable's going to stretch and the pads are going to wear down, so the rubbing will stop. So once you have this adjusted where you want, if you can see, there's a little tiny wheel here below the cap. To make sure that this doesn't adjust while you're riding, go ahead and turn this cap clockwise to where it tightens onto this part here, and now it's tight and it won't get out of adjustment while you're riding the bike. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing on the rear brake. So we're going to go ahead and get the caliper aligned with the disc. So I'm going to hold this tight, and while holding that, I'm going to turn these nice and snug. And then now that they're nice and snug, I can do my full tighten on it. Okay, so now that we have these tight, we're going to go ahead and spin it, and we don't hear any rubbing. So that's a good thing. That means now we can adjust both pads in until we hear rubbing. So it makes it easy at this point. So now what we're going to do is start with the stationary pad. So for now, to reset the caliper, manually pull on this. And then what I do is just do one click at a time. So we know there's no rubbing right now. Let's see what happens if I turn this in one click. Remember, before we pedal it, reset the caliper, and let's see what happens. So you hear just a little bit of rubbing. So I would prefer keeping it adjusted right here with a little bit of rubbing than with it out not rubbing at all, because again, it's going to break in very quickly. And it does help if you continue pedaling the bike, otherwise you hear the clicking of the wheel, and that can make it difficult to hear the brakes. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and tune the non-stationary pad. So we need to adjust this and tighten it on the cable. Now, it would help if you had someone spinning this while you do this so you don't have to hear the clicking. Since I'm doing this without help, I'm going to go ahead and turn the wheel pretty fast here. And then hold the cable and pull this up. And right there, I hear some rubbing. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten it just a little bit. And then go ahead and spin it again. Now what I'll do to make sure that I'm just before it's going to rub is I'm going to pull this just a little bit in and see how far I have to move it before it rubs. And I can do that while spinning the wheel, so it helps. Okay, so I have to turn it probably about 1/3 of an inch. And I don't want to have to trim it that far with this dial. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen this. I usually pinch my fingers under the cable to keep it from sliding down. And go up just a little bit. Try to go up 1/4 or 1/3 inch to where it started rubbing. Just tight enough to where it doesn't slide down. Let's go ahead and try it now. There we go. So you see when I barely pull on it, it starts rubbing. So this is where I'm going to want to tighten it all the way. Okay, so now that this is tight, we can go ahead and reset the caliper with the brake lever. So just pull it a couple times, and you see when I pull it, it does the same thing that we did manually. And now you can actually pedal it while doing the adjustment. So we're going to pedal it, and then we're going to turn this counterclockwise to trim it tighter until we hear rubbing. Alright, so there's just a little bit of rubbing right there. So let's go ahead and see if we can stretch the cable out a little bit. So as you can see, I'm pulling the brake lever. I'll pull it nice and tight a couple times. And let's see if it's still rubbing. See, the rubbing went away. So now, since we stretched the cable a little bit, let's go ahead and tighten it some more until we hear rubbing. And there's the rubbing again. So let's go ahead and reset the caliper and try to stretch out the cable. And it stretched again, so we're going to go ahead and we're just going to keep, and see now it started rubbing pretty quick, so we're pretty close to where we want it. Let's try stretching the cable out again. Pedal it. And what I'm trying to do is get it to where it keeps rubbing after I pull on the brake lever, so we know that we stretch the cable out as much as we can with it being brand new. So now we can hear it still rubbing, if you can hear it. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to turn this clockwise. You could leave it here if you'd like, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it clockwise just until the rubbing stops. And there we go. Rubbing stopped right there. So remember, use this little dial once you're done with your adjustments. And tighten it there. Test the brake. And there we go. We've adjusted both the front and rear brakes. Okay, so I'm going to do this while it's up on the rack. It's a little bit easier to see. If you don't have a rack, you can do this at any point. But it's very important to record the serial number of the bike. In case, heaven forbid, it gets stolen, you're going to want to provide law enforcement with the serial number to increase the chances of you getting the bike back. So what I do is I turn to the very last page of the manual here, and we have a spot to put the battery serial number, the bicycle serial number, write the model, and your purchase date. So on this particular model, the serial number is engraved on the left side next to the crank. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and jot down the battery serial number on this battery. It's on the sticker right here, and here's your serial number. Okay, and again, while it's still up, I'm going to take this opportunity to put on the Class 2 sticker. You really can put it anywhere on the bike on this model. I tend to just put it right down here. It's easy to show anyone who asks if you are allowed on the trail for Class 1 or Class 2 bike. Okay, we're going to go ahead and install the front fender along with the front reflector here. Now it does help, it's not included with the bike, but it does help if you have a Phillips screwdriver and then just any pair of pliers. It doesn't need to be anything that sturdy. So what we're going to do first is use our Phillips screwdriver, loosen the screw in this reflector, and then just imagine that the reflector, it's going to be standing up like this. Okay, so just imagine it sitting like this. So I usually put it so it's perpendicular to the ground here. So go ahead and tighten here. Doesn't have to be too tight. Now on this model, this little lip right here is sticking back because we're gonna have this fender piece right here and this is gonna be on the outside. It doesn't work. So I'm actually going to, now you don't have to put this on, it's up to you, but I'm going to put it on. So I'm gonna use my cutters here and I'm actually going to cut this lip off. And this way, it can sit nice and flush on the fender. So to get the fender in here, start back here, and then I usually put where these notches are, I put them just to the right of the tube, and then I kind of push it down, compress the tire down, and roll the tire forward. And there we go, so now we're in. So you see, unless you push down, it's not really gonna move. We're gonna take our hardware here, gonna take the nut off. Now again, you'll need pliers or another wrench or socket to be able to tighten this because it has the auto tightening nylon on it. Remove this washer here. Set these aside for now. So we're gonna go ahead and slide the bolt through the reflector. I'm gonna set this down. Now, this tube is a little bit too wide for these notches here, so I usually use two hands and I line it up and then I just kind of work it up. Just make sure that you can work it up and you'll see that it's going to bend them out just a little bit. That's fine because they're going to readjust once you tighten the bolt. So I make sure that I can slide it nice and easy in there. So now it's sitting there okay. So we're going to take our reflector with the bolt, going to go through onto the other side. We're going to put our washer on first. And then we're going to go ahead and get this started. So I'm not going to adjust the reflector or the fender quite yet. I want to get it a little bit tighter. So you're going to use the Allen wrench supplied. I usually will hold that here and then I'm going to use my pliers and hold the nut from spinning. And go ahead, and I find it easier to just turn this and check, because we're still pretty loose. I want to get it to where it's maybe just starting to tighten a little bit, but not really that much. So I can feel that there's a little bit of resistance on it now. So I'm going to go ahead and align the reflector up. So just turn it so it's straight up and down. And then the fender sits a little low, so what you have to do is just kind of work it up. So now that we've got it worked up, straighten this out. And if you let go, it should stay in place. And we're going to be adjusting it while we tighten. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten it just a little bit more. I'm going to look down, make sure it's lined up straight with the tire. Make sure it's not touching the tire. Alright, so everything's lined up. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down all the way. And that's it. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and install the rear reflector. So Phillips screwdriver is all we need for the rear one. Go ahead and loosen the end screw here. Get it to where it's at a 90-degree angle. Tighten the screw that's holding the joint of the reflector. Okay. Now this part, be very careful because there's a very small bolt in here, or nut, and it's very easy to get lost. So what I do is I put my finger over it, and then I loosen this. Pull this out. Now the whole time I'm holding my finger over this so the nut doesn't come out. Open this up, slide it on, and again, see my finger, I'm holding it on the whole time. And now I'm going to go ahead and take the screw, slide it through, and use my Phillips screwdriver to at least get it started on the nut. There we go. So now I can let go because it's locked on there. And I usually just slide this up here, make sure the left and right is adjusted properly, and tighten that other screw all the way. Okay. As mentioned in the beginning of the video, sometimes you have pieces that fall off during shipment. So this cap had fallen off during shipment and it was in the box. I'm going to go ahead and it covers this axle bolt here. Okay, and you just slide it on and it's good to go. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and install the bell. You just need a Phillips screwdriver again. So go ahead and loosen the screw. Pull this open and slide it onto the bar. Put the screw in. And go ahead and tighten it down. And you can put it on either side, it really doesn't matter. And to ring it, well, that's not tight enough. So that's a good test to make sure it's tight enough. All right, so try ringing it. You've got a bell to warn people. Now the panel and shipping is usually down. This thing, the panel you can adjust, so put it right there at a diagonal. And we've got everything assembled on the bar. Go ahead and test out the folding mechanism. Now because it's a brand new bike, it's a little bit stiff and hard to fold and unfold, but it will loosen up over time. So what we're gonna do is you wanna loosen this clamp here. Once it's loose, slide it out. Now, I actually use my foot to help myself fold and unfold it, so I'll show you here. Now, what you want to do is to break the connection, we need to lift this whole piece up. It just sits on a spring. So I hold my knee on the bike, grab the front of the bike, kind of hold my armpit over the seat, lift this up, and you're going to push with your knee and pull with your hand just to break that brake. Now that we made the brake, you can let go of that. From here, I go ahead and put my foot on the frame and then just pull it all the way back. Sometimes you have to adjust the pedals so that way there's room. I'm going to lift the kickstand up, just pull it all together. I'm just going to sit down right here. Lift up, and now we're folded. If you want to make it even smaller, you can actually take the seat out as well. So now to refold it, we're just going to do the very opposite of what we did to fold it. And then on here, you have to do the opposite. We have to push on this side. So I'm going to go ahead and push and pull here. Get it against that. Lift this up, push down, or push in. Now it's locked. Slide this over, lock this in place, and there you go. Now you're ready to ride. Okay, so now let's go ahead and put the battery on and test the display, make sure everything turns on okay. To take the battery on and off, you do have to take the seat out. Now remember, you can charge the battery on or off the bike. It does not matter. I usually take the battery out when, well obviously if you can't get the bike close enough to a wall outlet to charge it, but also in transportation. It makes the bike a lot lighter with the battery out. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that the key is in the unlock position and the lock mechanism is flush here. Line the slot up with the bar. Go all the way down. Push down. Now turn the key clockwise and you see it locks in right here. So you've got 3 positions on this battery. You've got unlock, locked but off, and then on. So off, unlock, off but locked, on. Now that the battery is on, we can go ahead and turn on the display. Just tap the power button on and off, and now we're loaded up. So when the batteries come from the factory, they're never fully charged, so you'll see that you've got about 75% charge. Each dot represents about 25%, so it is suggested that you fully charge the battery before riding. You've got 3 pedal assist levels. It starts off, or it defaults to turning into medium when you turn it on. You hit mode, and you can adjust the pedal assist. Low, medium, high. The higher the pedal assist level, the faster the bike will go while you're pedaling. Furthermore, you have throttle. If you turn this right here, the bike will go. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and show you the charger, so we'll unbox it here. So this just plugs into any regular wall outlet. The charging port on the battery is under this flap, so just turn it. And you see you've got the 3 holes there, and you've got the 3 nubs there. And when you plugged into the wall, you're going to go ahead and plug this in. And again, you can do this on or off the bike, it doesn't matter. And then on the charger is a little window right here. When it's charging, it will be red. When it's done charging, it turns green. Okay, the last thing are the tire pressures. The tires usually arrive a little bit low on pressure, so you're going to want to put them up to the proper pressure. These tires max out at 20 psi. I usually put them at 18 psi. That's good for on-road. If you're doing any off-roading, you may want them a little bit lower, but 18 seems to be a happy medium. Enjoy the bike.